Hi there, and welcome to this week's episode of Healthy TV. This is episode number 17, and today we're talking about the truth about fat. And this all came from an excellent blog post that my colleague Dr. Hawks or Dr. Dave wrote earlier this week, and it was all about how to become a fat burning machine. And it really led to a bunch of questions that came up in the practice. And I thought I'd start addressing some of them. And I think when it comes to fat, there's really some, deeply set prejudices, that's a tough word to say, against fat, and it comes from, really the last 60 years of indoctrination that we've been taught that fat is bad. And so I wanted to dive into some of the myths around fat, some of the things I think are really important for you to know, and also I'm going to give you some one recommendation at the end of an excellent snack, one of my favorite snacks. That was a big request when I polled the audience about what they were wanting to get out of this month's series of shows. And so I'm going to go through my favorite snack, and it actually is a very fatty one, and it's super healthy. So and I'll go through that right at the end. Now, I think probably most of you have at least come across this, maybe the change in thinking around fat, and maybe you've seen a headline here or there that like maybe fat's not as bad as we all thought it was. Even the World Health Organization has rescinded its statements around saturated fat, or at least it's diminished the severity of their statement around the negative impacts of saturated fat. And similarly, there's been statements taken back or at least reframed around cholesterol. And so I thought it would be really interesting to just give you maybe like a minute's worth of a history lesson on why for so long we thought fat was bad. And it really comes down to a researcher that was around and active in the 50s. His name is Ancel Keys, and he's forever known now in the nutrition community as the author of the 7-country study. And what he did was he really set out to prove that saturated fat, so consumption of saturated fat, was correlated with increased risk of heart disease. And in fact, he was trying to prove that saturated fat caused heart disease, I think was his ultimate aim. And so he set out, and he did a really interesting design. He looked at different countries, looked at their levels of saturated fat consumption, and then looked at their deaths due to heart disease. And what he found, and what he published, actually I should say, what he published was that as rates of, or as amounts of saturated fat went up, so consumption goes up, then the rates of deaths due to heart disease also went up. And that, it's very clear, picture like a graph where the graph is, it looks like a very linear relationship, looked very convincing. And he was also quite influential in his position. He got very involved in politics, and that really that one study was the turning point. It was a very big pivot in the American, recommendations around diet. At the same time, they were further developing their dietary recommendations, so their food pyramid. And so it was very convenient timing where that really influenced, that one study had a huge influence on recommendations that moved forward. And really to this day, almost really to this really the last couple of years, that's been the dominant thought, is that as you consume more saturated fat, you're increasing your risk of heart disease. Now, unfortunately, this guy who has now admitted that he was fraudulent in his reporting and his publishing, because he actually originally had 22 countries included in that original study design, and chose the 7 countries that best matched his hypothesis. And the other ones, if you actually look at the graph of all of the countries included, there's really no relationship. In fact, there's, if anything, a very weak negative relationship. So as saturated fat goes up, rates of heart disease and deaths due to heart disease go down slightly. And so, unfortunately though, no one knew about that, and literally created the low-fat craze. And that's what we've all grown up in. Anyone in my age group, and certainly in the generations above and below, we've all grown up with this myth that saturated fat is bad. And in fact, it's always paired, if you ever pay attention, it's always the artery clogging saturated fat. Now, What we do know now, and it's been some researchers have been working tirelessly probably for the last 20 odd years, and they've finally been able to show that there really is no correlation with consumption of saturated fats, particularly when it comes from healthy animals. And so it's really removed a lot of this fear for a lot of people around consumption of fat. In fact, we know now that the particularly saturated fat, but all really all types of fat, as long as they're coming from a high quality source, are actually a health food. That there's a few minor exceptions, but in terms of like what we would just kind of generally think of fat, butter, olive oil, coconut oil, bacon fat, which is my favorite. All those things are all healthy. Consider those health foods. I know that sounds crazy because we've been all indoctrinated with this dogma for the last 50 years, but it actually is true. So, and there's actually a few more details around that, and this is something that we talk about a lot in our Eat by Design seminar. So if you're interested in attending the Eat by Design seminar, just put a comment below. Just say, hey, I'd like to come to your show or come to your workshop, and I'll make sure to follow up with you and give you the appropriate links so you can sign up for the next one. So this leads us to, I guess the next question is like, well, what would you consider like healthy fat? And so I've named a couple there. As long as it's coming from healthy animal or vegetable sources, and I mean like high quality sources. So grass-fed butter would be a great example. It could be organic coconut oil. If it's healthy pigs that you're getting your bacon from, then that I consider that like liquid gold. If you cook bacon and you've got the fat sitting on the side, you can just pour that into a jar and use that to the best thing, like fry your vegetables in the bacon fat. That's so tasty. And some other ones, some more conventional ones you probably would have previously considered healthy, like olive oil. So olive oil, coconut oil is the best probably of the vegetarian sources to cook with. Olive oil actually is safe to cook with. You just don't want to be reheating it over and over again. Similarly, avocado oil, you can consider cooking with that. Some people don't like the flavor. And then, like I mentioned, the animal fats, totally okay to cook with because they are 100% saturated, which means they don't oxidize nearly as easily. Now, if you are using any vegetable oils, particularly like the vegetable seed oils, so that would be like corn oil, safflower, sunflower, sorry, not sunflower is okay, but safflower, I'm missing a few other ones, canola, I guess would be corn. Those are terrible. You should just throw those out right now. Do not be cooking with those. The problem with them is that they are polyunsaturated fats, meaning that they're quite, you can think of them as like weak fats, and that they oxidize really easily. So as soon as you start heating them, they denature and oxidize. So you definitely don't want to be eating those. They're also full of omega-6s, which are really prone to pushing your body into inflammation. So I hope that helps to clarify a little bit. Now, it probably will lead to some more questions, and so please put those below because usually this is one of those topics at the seminar that we spend quite a bit of time on. People have lots of questions because it's just so foreign to what they have known. I've included the link to Dr. Dave's article as well because he actually goes through a great strategy to help become a fat burning machine. And so certainly if like body composition or weight loss is a goal for you, definitely check that blog out because there's some great strategies in there and even just a good concept to kind of wrap your head around that relates to fat consumption. So I'll leave it at that. Now I did mention a simple snack. I'm not going to demonstrate it. Perhaps as I get better at the technology side, I'll start to show you some videos of how to prepare some food. But my favorite simple snack, take avocado. So just you can take a whole avocado and you're going to mix it with some goat cheese. So the nice ripe, soft goat cheese. So about an inch of a roll with a whole avocado. Mash that up. Add maybe a tablespoon or less of lemon juice. So just a squirt of lemon juice, some salt and pepper. Use a fork. You can just mash it all up. and then slice some cucumber slices, some celery sticks, some carrot sticks, and it's an excellent dip. It's full of healthy fats, that avocado and the fat in the goat cheese. And then you get some nice healthy vegetables, and you got a great snack, easy to transport. The only downfall of this one is that you have to prepare it fresh. It will otherwise, as you know, with avocados, it starts to brown. So you just keep that in mind, but it's really simple, takes about maybe 90 seconds to prep, and one of my favorite go-to snacks, especially like. All right, sorry about that. I ran out of storage there, so tripped over the finish line, but I just wanted to tidy things up. If you have any other questions about that snack I was talking about, or any other, but if you want any other suggestions, I'll try and include one in each show moving forward. And next week, actually, what I'm going to talk about is yet another myth. And I mentioned it earlier, and this is the myth that cholesterol is the devil, and that we should be, the standard should be reducing our cholesterol to zero. At least that's what most people, I think, believe. And so I'm going to talk about actually the exact opposite, how cholesterol is one of the most important molecules in the body, and how you can know how to interpret, at least from a general sense, your cholesterol results if you've been monitored, and what you can do to help manage any bad cholesterol levels naturally, so just as a means of changing your lifestyle as opposed to relying on medication. So I will get into that all next week. I look forward to it. Have a great weekend, and we'll chat next week.